Please remember that the complete information for the class that you are about to view is at elithecomputerguy.com. Not only do we have our videos there, but we have part lists, diagrams, pictures, and even complete code examples. So if you are watching this video and you want more information, please go to elithecomputerguy.com. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and in today's class, I'm going to be showing you how to create filters for your HTML form and PHP file upload script. So in a previous class, I showed you how to use an HTML form and a PHP script to be able to upload files to your web server. The issue being is with the project that I showed you before, there were no real limitations on what you were able to upload. So basically, you could upload almost any file size, you could upload any type of file, so on and so forth. Obviously, if you're going to be creating an application, you are going to want specific files to be uploaded to your server. So if you're going to be creating a application that's going to be dealing with image files, you don't necessarily want people to be able to upload PDF files or TXT files. If you're going to be having your users be able to upload files, you may also want to be able to limit the size of the files that are going to be uploaded, those types of things. So in the class today, I'm going to be showing you how to create some basic filters to prevent your users from just being able to upload any files that they try to upload. So the warning, Will Robinson, warning for today is be careful with filters. Know what you're trying to do with filters before you add filters to your web application. One of the biggest problems for end users is that many times people that develop applications or possibly administrators, they actually add too many filters and don't explain what's going on to the end user. So I think about this back in the day when I used to own a domain name called starvinggeek.info. So I had an email address called eli@starvinggeek.info, and so that was my email address that I used. One of the problems that I ran into, though, about 20 years ago, is although .info was a legitimate domain name, it was a legitimate suffix, many times when I tried to create an account with many web services, they would fail me out because their filter did not recognize .info domain names. So although I had a legitimate email address and domain name, simply because their filter did not understand what .info was, and they failed me out. Oh, all kinds of hijinks ensued. So one of the things that you really need to be thinking about when you're creating these filters is really make sure you understand the requirements for what your filters are supposed to do. So again, when you're thinking about things such as only allowing certain extensions to be uploaded, make sure you actually understand how the extensions are typed out in the real world. So again, with things like JPEG files, if you allow .jpeg but don't allow .jpg, then a lot of people are going to try to upload .jpg files, and then it will fail out because you have not added that to the system. So one of the things you really need to be thinking about with any kind of filters that are going to be interacting with your web application is really make sure you understand the requirements, really make sure you understand what problems you might run into, and if you're really going to put this into production world, test it with a few users, let them hammer the hell out of it, see what weird problems they run into, and then fix that before you put that out into the production environment. Because again, remember, with your users, with the boss, with the people hiring you, so on and so forth, basically, if the application doesn't work, they're not going to care why it doesn't work. They're not going to care that, oh, you misconfigured how the extensions were supposed to be read, and that's why it didn't work, versus something else. They're just going to know, look, my secretary tried to upload files to the application that you created, it failed, therefore your project failed, therefore you're fired. So when you're thinking about adding these types of filters to any of your web applications, really make sure you understand what you're trying to accomplish, make sure you understand what problems you might run into, and think about all of that before you deploy this into a production environment. So the demonstration that I'm going to be showing you today is going to filter based off of three different aspects. The first is going to be whether or not a file name already exists of the file that you're trying to upload. So imagine you're trying to create an application, people are going to be uploading to that application, and you do not want to overwrite files. So maybe if a file name already exists, what this is going to say is that file name already exists, and so it is then going to fail out. The next filter we're going to have is going to say a certain size. So basically, the example that I'm going to give today is that if you're over 50,000 kilobytes, it will fail out. It'll basically say your file is too large, give me a smaller file. And then the final filter that we're going to be doing today is going to be looking at the extension. So basically, we're going to have a GIF extension, a JPEG extension, basically those types of extensions. If the file that you're trying to upload has that type of extension, it will allow the file to upload. If not, it will fail out. So we'll be looking at those 3 different ways to filter file uploads. Again, whenever you're coding, there are a lot of different ways you can filter file uploads. I'm just giving you these 3 examples to basically show you how it can be done. If you're looking for a specific solution, just do a bit of Google searching and I'm sure you can find it. So with that, let's go over to the demonstration computer. I will show how the file actually, or this little script actually works when it's up and running, and then we'll go over and take a look at the code. So here we are back at my demonstration computer. Again, I'm using a MacBook Pro and I'm showing you this with the Safari web browser. It's important to understand though, I'm simply using this to access the web server that I've created over at 10.0.1.36 that has an HTML form called file upload.html. So with this, it's a very simple file upload form. Basically, it allows me to choose a file and it allows me to submit the file, and that's it. What's going to happen though is I've created a filter, and the filter again is going to look for 3 criteria. The first is whether or not the file already exists. If the file already exists, then the script is going to fail out and say the file already exists. The next is to say whether the file is above 50,000 kilobytes. If it's above 50,000 kilobytes, it will fail out and it won't work. The final is basically looking to see whether it's a JPG, or GIF file. If it has that extension, if it does, it'll upload. If not, it will fail out. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're just going to actually upload and show you how things will work if things upload how they're supposed to. So we come over here, and again, I have all these like image files. So I have this img 5473.jpeg, and that's 45 kilobytes. So we'll use that. So we're going to open this up, and then we're going to hit submit. And so everything went through fine. So file was uploaded, img 5473.jpeg. So let's go and let's try to upload the exact same file again. So if we choose file, and then where was it? It was 45, right? So this is the file that we just previously uploaded. So that has actually been uploaded. So if we try to do that now and we try to submit, what we're going to see is the file already exists. So this script failed out because the file already existed. If we go back and we can choose another file, let's choose a larger file here. Again, we're going to hit submit. That was about 105 kilobytes. We hit this, file is over 50 kilobytes in size, so that is going to fail out. Then if we're going to go back, again, we can choose a file. Let me go to desktop. Let me just find something like a PHP script. So we have this PHP script here. So obviously this is not a JPEG file. We're going to open. We're going to hit submit. And again, file type is not allowed. Upload JPEG or JPEG, JPG, or GIF, and go back. Again, remember whenever you're creating these applications or even these simple little scripts, always make sure that you don't give yourself a dead end. Always be able to do things like simply go back. So I simply have a hyperlink here that allows me to go back to the form. So that shows you how these filters work. If the file already exists, it fails. If the file is too big, it fails. If the file doesn't have the right extension, it fails. And that's basically how it works. So with that, let's go over and actually take a look at the code. So here we are on my web server. Again, I'm running Ubuntu 18.04 LTS, and I'm using the desktop version. So we have the graphical user interface and we can visualize things a little bit easier. Everything that I'm showing you today basically should run on almost any version or distribution of Linux that you would want to use. Again, everything that I'm showing you can be run purely at the command line. You do not have to have a graphical user interface. I am simply using the graphical user interface because it's a little bit easier to visualize everything. At this point, you should have a basic idea of how to upload files to your web server. So again, with your php.ini file, you need to make sure that file uploads are on. If php.ini files do not allow for file uploads, none of this is going to work. The filters won't work because nothing's going to get uploaded. Beyond that, do remember there's a file size limitation. The default limitation with PHP is a 2 megabyte file. So if you want to be able to upload larger files than that, you're going to have to actually go in there and modify the PHP php.ini file. Beyond simply modifying the php.ini file, you are going to have to restart the Apache 2 service. Remember, if you modify configurations but you do not restart the service, those configurations do not become active, and then insanity ensues. So do remember, whenever you modify php.ini or any other configuration files in your Linux server, to always restart the services that are associated with them. Beyond that, I have a folder, again, within the root of the Apache 2 web server and the HTML folder. We have a folder called folder. This folder called folder, again, has the permissions to allow people to be able to write to it. So again, for others, so basically this is for people on the internet, for everybody, people have the ability to write to this folder. So these are some of the basic things, again, that you should remember if you're going to be creating this type of script. So beyond that, let's go and actually take a look at the code. The first bit of the code is what we dealt with before in the previous demonstration. Essentially, all we have here is a very basic HTML form that allows you to upload the file. So the form action is going to be pointed to that file upload.php script. So the PHP script that we're going to be dealing with in a second, it's going to be uploading there. Method equals post. The type is the multi-part form data. And then all we're simply doing here is the input type equals file. The name of what we're going to be uploading is going to be upload. Here we have the uppercase U. And then the input type is simply going to be submit. So if we go over, take a look at the demonstration, again, this is what we get here. So we have the choose file. So this is the input type for file. And then we have the submit button. So now let's go and actually take a look at the PHP script itself. So there's some interesting things going on with this PHP script, and there's some things I haven't talked about in previous classes, but I think you'll be able to keep up with as I explain things. So with here, again, the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to open up the PHP. So we're going to have to say that this is a PHP script. Then the next thing that we have to do is we have to create a variable that will say what the directory we're trying to put these files into. So I created a folder, literally called folder. So $directory is going to equal period / folder / So this is simply the directory we're going to be dumping the files into. The next thing that we have to do is we have to create the file name. And so the variable for the file name, the value that we're going to give to it is going to be the folder, so basically directory. So what directory we're going to put into it, and then concatenate. And we use this function called base name. So basically with base name, what that does is it takes just the file name of the file that we're dealing with. So sometimes when you're dealing with files, you have the entire file path. And so what base name does as a function is it strips out everything other than the file name. So what this is going to do here is this $_files. This represents the file that was uploaded to the server. The name of that file is upload. So this here corresponds to this name right here. And then the name this is the name of that. So basically what base name is going to do is it's going to rip out anything other than the file name itself, and then it's going to concatenate on folder. So basically with this, it would be like period / folder / img_753.jpeg, and that is what we are going to get for the file name here. The next thing that we're going to do is, this is kind of interesting, is we're actually going to create an array of that file name. Because one of the things we're going to need to do down here is we're actually going to need to check based off of the extension. So if the extension is something, then we either need to allow the script to run or to fail out. So again, we need to actually be able to get that information out of the variables that we're dealing with. So what's really cool here is we have this function called path_info. And with path_info, what you're able to do is you're actually able to divide out a file path into its components and then access those components in an array. So basically you can get the file name, you can get the extension, you can get the folder path. Basically it breaks all those things out into an extension, and then you can interact with those individual keys within the array. So what I'm doing here is $file name array is I'm turning the file name into an array using the path_info function so that I can then get the extension out later and be able to do an if-else, or basically an if statement based off of that. The final thing that we're going to do down here is we're going to create a variable for extensions. So basically, what extensions are we interested in? So we're going to be creating an array for this so that we can easily add or subtract from this in the future. So down in the function where we're going to be checking for what the extension is, I don't want to have to put in a lot of ors or a lot of ands, that type of thing. So that's one of the things you can do is, conditional, if this or this or this or this or this or this, it becomes very tedious, especially when you're doing things like extensions. You may want to allow up to 10 different types of extensions, so you don't want to do 10 different ors down in the if statement. So one of the things that we're doing here is we're creating a variable for extension, ext, then we're setting the value to that of an array, and then we're adding the different extensions that we're interested in. So double quotation mark JPEG, double quotation mark JPG, double quotation mark GIF, you can keep going. And so basically then what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate based off of, is this in the array? Is this value anywhere in this array? If so, allow it to happen. If not, fail out, that type of thing. Then the final thing that we're going to do down here, this is a simple variable, basically that we're simply setting, is good. So we're creating a variable is good. We're setting this to 0. And what's going to happen is all the way down here is essentially if is good does not equal 1, then we're actually going to upload the file. So again, one of the things you have to be thinking about when you're testing based off of multiple conditions, then how are you going to tell the final if statement whether or not it should run? So here what we're simply doing is if it's not 1, then you will move the file into the folder. If it is, then you will fail out. So we go through, we can start taking a look at the filters that I've created. So here I have an if statement. With the if statement, what we're going to do here is there's a function called file exists. So this is very simple. Basically, if the file exists, right? So this function file exists simply returns whether or not the file exists. So we're going to give it the file name. So we have the file name variable here. So the file name is the directory plus the end file name itself. So it's going to say, does this file already exist? If it does, it's going to echo out the file already exists with a little break, and is good is going to be set to 1. So at this point, is good will get set to 1. So that means down here, if it's set to 1, then this is going to fail out, right? Then we're going to go down here, and we're going to check based off of the file size. So if, and then we have that file array, so $_files. We give the name of the file that's uploaded, so upload. Again, that name comes from here. And then with this array, it actually has a size in it. So when you upload the file using the HTML form in PHP, it knows what the size of that file is. So we're going to simply say here is if the size is greater than 50,000, we're going to echo, we're going to say print out file is over 50 kilobytes. In size, is good is going to go to 1. So the file will not get moved. So basically it's going to simply print out file is over 50 kilobytes, redo, do again. So that's how you do file size. So with this, it's the array for the file that you're uploading. You do the name that comes in from the HTML form, and then you can simply say size, basically what the size of that file is, and then you can see whether that's above 50,000 or not, or whatever number you put in here, and go from there. The final one, and this is kind of the really interesting one here, is we're going to basically look at the extension. So what we're going to say is if the extension matches the extensions that we're looking for, or doesn't, so on and so forth. So basically here, what we're going to say is if not. So if not in array. So the in_array, basically what this does is this looks at the first thing that you get it. Basically, it looks at this first field that you feed it, and then you feed it the array, and then it says basically is this in the array. So the array here, as you can see when it pops up, is JPEG, JPG, or GIF. So basically what it's saying is this extension in the array? Or really what it's saying here is it not? So if you put an exclamation point in front of a function that's looking for a true false statement, basically it says not. So if this is not in the array, then you say file type is not allowed, upload JPEG, JPG, GIF, so on and so forth, is good, goes to 1. So what we're doing here is this file name array, right? So we took the file name here. Using path info, we turn the file name into an array, and we set that value to the $file name array variable. So then when we're down here, since file name array is now an array, we can look for one of the keys in the array. So one of the keys is extension. So we can simply call like I want to know what the extension in the array is, and so that will come with PHP or TXT or HTML or whatever else. And so with that, it will see, does this equal anything that's in this array, right? If not, the file type is not allowed, is good goes to 1. If it is, then it'll just pass through and you get to go and actually upload the file. And then past that, basically we have if is good is not equal to 1. So basically has not been set to 1 by one of these if statements up here. Then we're going to move the uploaded file just like we did in the previous example with being able to upload files to our web server using an HTML form. So this is basically how the script runs. Again, we have a couple of new functions in here that's interesting. This path info function can be very valuable. Again, it can turn a full file path and file name into an array, so you can actually test based off of different components in there. Then beyond that, we have the file exists. So does a file exist? And then we have the in an array. So this is very nice because again, you can create an array. You can create a list of things that you're interested in, things that you want or don't want, and then you can simply use the in_array function to see if something is in the array or not, and then have the if-else statement interact with it based off of whatever criteria you set. So this is a basic example of how you're able to filter uploads when you're using an HTML form and a PHP script. Again, there are a lot of other things that you can do. So, play around with it and see what works best for you. So there you go. Now you know how to create some filters for your file upload script using HTML and PHP. Again, being able to upload files to a web server is a very valuable tool for whatever web application that you're going to be creating. But when you're dealing with users, when you're dealing with end users, you always want to limit them. You always want to limit them. If you allow them to do whatever they want to do, they're going to do things that you have not even imagined. Again, they're going to be trying to upload, the entire season of Westworld or something up to your poor little web server. And you're going to be like, why? Why? I'm looking for receipts. You're supposed to be uploading PDFs of your receipts. Why did you upload a movie file? But that's the type of thing that users will do if you allow them to do it. So by coming up with these little filters, it allows you basically to limit what your end users are able to do. Though I will warn you, when you start using these filters, give your users latitude. I mean, don't give them too much latitude. Don't give them too much latitude, but give them a little bit of latitude. One of the problems you get into with again especially a lot of coders and a lot of sysadmins is they really want to be hard asses. They really want to be like, this is what my users will do, and they will not be able to do anything else. And that doesn't go too well when the CEO's secretary decides that they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and then the secretary can't get their job done, and the CEO gets mad, and everything kind of goes to hell. So one of the things you do need to be thinking about when you create these filters is, give your users limits, but give them reasonable limits. So really, I would argue, like, if you want files to be like under 50 kilobytes in size, I'd argue actually make the filter like 75 kilobytes, right? Because if you set 50 and they upload something that's 51, that fails out, right? So if you say it's 50, and then they upload something that's 52, and the actual setting is 75, then it sails through and you don't get a whole bunch of arguments. And that's the kind of thing that you really need to be thinking about when you're creating these applications for the end user. Not just what your requirements are, but frankly, again, when you're dealing with professionals out in the real world, they're not going to want to nitpick about a couple of kilobytes one way or the other, right? They just want the application to work. And so you are going to have to give them enough leeway to allow the application to work. The other thing to realize, too, is when we start talking about things such as security measures, do remember that your filters will only do whatever you code them to do. So like where I showed you with being able to choose the extension, right? So only files of a certain extension will be able to be uploaded onto your web server. Well, realize if somebody, if somebody has a movie file and then they just change the end extension to .pdf, right, or .jpg, that'll sail through the filter just fine. Because remember, this script isn't actually looking at the file itself, it's looking at that extension. So if somebody modifies the extension, that goes through, that gets uploaded to the web server. Again, that's the kind of time when you may start to have weird problems on your server, because if they're uploading files that are not actually the type that you're expecting when your other code runs, when your server does whatever it's supposed to do, you might run into weird issues. That's also a possible vulnerability for your web server. One of the things that hackers will do is they will upload their scripts to your server with a .jpg extension or .gif extension. And then if they can have a script or they can have something already on your server that all it does is rename, that final bit, that final extension for whatever they've been able to upload, they may then actually be able to fire a script off. So they may come up with a virus, they may come up with a script, they upload it to your server, basically camouflaging it as a JPEG file. If they have some other way to then modify what the extension is or modify how that file gets interacted with, they may then be able to run that script from your server. And again, that's a vulnerability that you may run into. So do remember, whenever you're dealing with security, you've really got to deal with multiple layers of security. Again, not just the filter in your PHP script, but make sure your file permissions are proper. Make sure, again, if you have random people uploading files, have it compartmentalized or firewalled off of your main infrastructure. You have to think about all of those types of things. But this is a basic thing to basically, to try to keep your users in line when they're using your web application. So that's basically how filters work for when you're going to be using an HTML form and a PHP script to upload files to your web server. As always, I enjoy doing this class, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. If you like the content that I create, please think about going to eliTheComputerGuy.com and becoming a member or donating. Please understand that all of the educational videos are in front of the paywall. That includes the videos, that includes the notes, the diagrams, and the code example. All of that is freely available and in front of the paywall. But if you want to watch opinion videos, or if you want to be able to comment, you do need to become a member. Membership is $5 a month or $60 a year and gives you access to those opinion videos and the ability to comment. If you don't want to become a member, you just want to give a one-time donation, there's also a donate button where you can do that. Please understand, in order to provide the education that I am, it does cost money. Servers cost money, equipment costs money, travel costs money. All of these things cost a reasonable amount of money, and the fact of the matter is YouTube's advertising program no longer supports creators the way that it used to. So if you want these classes to continue to stick around and you find them to be valuable, please think about either becoming a monthly member or donating a few dollars for this project.